Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second module of the Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt training. My name is Chudel Gayatin, and thank you very much for attending this live session. Let me just go to the proceed button. So let's have a recap on the previous session that we have. Last time we defined what Six Sigma is, and there are two definitions. So if you're able to say what those two definitions are of Six Sigma, anyone? Or you can put in the chat box. If you remember, there are two definitions of Six Sigma. I'll give you probably 30 seconds to write it down in the chat box. Yep, thank you very much, Naki. So one definition of Six Sigma is a description of a near perfect process, which is about 99.9996%. And the other definition of Six Sigma, it is a methodology in problem solving, how you can improve your process. The next question is, what is the focus of Lean? I think I briefly mentioned this, but if you can recall, what is the focus of Lean? If you remember it. Okay, yes, correct. It's removing waste from processes, and normally Lean is used for cycle time reduction type of projects. If you want to improve your timeliness, then you use the Lean methodology. And the last question is, why do we consider Lean Six Sigma as a toolkit? Okay. We consider Lean Six Sigma as a toolkit because it has a buffet of tools that you can use for different types of problems. So you can have a tool to address, let's say if you're dealing with ambiguities from your customer, there's a specific tool in Lean Six Sigma that you can use. If you want to improve your process in terms of removing errors, there's also a specific tool in Lean Six Sigma, and we'll be exposed to some of that in this course. Okay, let's move on. So as I've mentioned, Six Sigma, one definition of the Six Sigma is the methodology, or the step-by-step approach in terms of solving an issue. And the methodology that we're going to use in tackling for this course is the DMAIC methodology. It's what we used when there is an existing process, and DMAIC stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Okay. And DMAIC methodologies is an example of methodology. There are other methodologies out there. For example, you might have been exposed to what we call the scientific method. It's a methodology. It's a step-by-step process in addressing questions related to science. So it starts with an observation. You have a question, you have a hypothesis, you perform an experiment, come up with a conclusion, and the result. Another methodology that's out there is the PDCA. Not sure if you're familiar with this one. It's an approach to problem solving. So it's PDCA stands for plan, do, check, act. Okay? You define and develop the product. You do it, and then you do inspect, and then you do some corrective action. Okay, these are example of methodologies out there. And of course, the methodology that we are using here will be the DMAIC methodology, because Six Sigma, one of the definition of a Six Sigma, it is a methodology. And we are, the way we would tackle this training will be through a modular approach by tackling each of the phases of that methodology. It's composed of 5 phases. The first one is define. The define is where we identify the focus area of the project. We go to measure. This is where we quantify the pain point. And then we go to analyze and define the root causes of the problem. Then we proceed to improve, to implement a solution and verify if indeed the solutions that we have done are able to improve the process. And the last piece will be control, to make sure that the solution becomes sustainable. So that's how we would tackle the modules in this training. Also, please consider that because Lean Six Sigma is a toolkit, in each of the phases, we will be encountering different type of tools. That's the meaning of why I put the picture of a toolkit there, because in each of the phases, we will be encountering tools that you can use for depending on the situation that you'll be exposed to. So we go to the define phase. In define phase, we try to understand the problem. Okay. So in define phase, we identify the focus area, and the question is, what does the customer expect of the process? In the define module or the define phase, we will cover 3 major topics for this one. One will be the project selection. Because sometimes in companies, selecting a project can be a task in itself. In other situations, the project can be quite obvious. You can immediately come up with a project. Okay, so we'll tackle about project selection, and then we will cover what we call a project charter. Okay, what are the components of the project charter? This is quite useful when you have a Six Sigma project, and we also will discuss about process mapping and go through different topics in process mapping. So the question is, where could projects come from? Okay, so it depends on which business you are in, but normally there are 3 possible sources where you can start your Lean Six Sigma project. There's what you call the voice of the customer. So the voice of the customer can provide you customer complaints. It could be in the product recalls or the feedback of the customer. And the information here will make you know what type of projects you would want to pursue. Also, another source of projects would come from what we call as the voice of the process. So you look at your process, you look at the breakdowns, the defects or operational efficiency. Normally, this is most applicable for the manufacturing setup, but I do believe that majority of the people here in this course are coming from the service-oriented background. So I think most of the time, what's most applicable to you will be coming from what we call the voice of the customer. And there's another piece, what we call the voice of the business. Normally, this is much applicable if you're running a business. It could be profitability. It could be a project about revenue target or about organic growth. So you can use this slide as a reference if you would like to brainstorm or where you can start your Lean Six Sigma project. We go to the first tool probably defined that's quite useful. It's what we call the VOC to CTQ. VOC stands for voice of the customer, and CTQ stands for critical to quality. Normally, you use this tool if your customer has some ambiguous requirements. So let's say you talk to your customer and he has some feedback and you want to come up with Six Sigma projects or improvement plans. You can use this simple tool for the VOC to CTQ. Voice of the customer, you translate it into critical to quality. So it's just a matter of a drill down. You look for the need of the customer, you identify what are the quality drivers, what would address that need of the customer, then you translate that into a performance requirement. So normally a performance requirement is something that's quite easy to measure. It's something that is within your control and you can do from your end. So it could be that in the performance requirement, it's just something that's quick and easy that you can easily do, or it can be a Six Sigma project on its own to focus it. So for example, let's look at this example here. Let's say that the need is a good customer service. Okay, you're probably, I think this is an example maybe in a restaurant. Okay, so you want to improve your good customer service. You try to ask your customer what really drives a good customer service. It could be that one factor could be the waiting time. Okay, another factor could be having a pleasant staff. Another factor that could drive the need for good customer service could be your refund policy. And from that quality driver, you can drill down further and what could be the performance requirement. So it could be that one measure of waiting time will be 90% of your customers are you satisfied with your waiting time? Because waiting time is inevitable, but at what extent are they really satisfied? So it might be that you can do a survey and let's say 90% are satisfied with your waiting time, then that's a good performance requirement. Or it could be that the waiting time would be from the customer perspective is that they would want all phone calls to be answered within 20 seconds. That's a good measure. Okay. Or it could be that any purchases or refund are processed within 2 minutes. So it can vary. It depends on the situation. So maybe if you're running in a bank, if you're managing a bank, a good waiting time might be defined by the customer that, from the moment he enters the bank till he leaves, it's probably just 5 minutes. Okay, that could be a good measure of waiting time. So it varies on the situation. Pleasant staff. So an example of a performance requirement for a pleasant staff might be all customers are greeted within 30 seconds of entering the store, or all customer-facing staff to smile genuinely when interacting with customers. So these are performance requirements for this quality driver called having a pleasant staff. Maybe from a refund policy, your performance requirement could be 80% of your customers are satisfied with your refund policy. So there are a lot of quality drivers in a specific situation. The thing is, you need to talk to your customer to identify what really drives the satisfaction of your customer. Now, this VOC to CTQ tool I actually use in real life. I think a scenario I had in the past was one of my clients told me that, hey, I want to have an effective face-to-face meeting. So it was just that statement, effective face-to-face meeting. So as it is ambiguous. Okay, how would you define an effective face-to-face meeting? So when your customer gives this, you need to ask further from your customer, what do you mean by effective face-to-face meeting? So I had a discussion with that customer so that it would help me design the structure and the delivery of the face-to-face meeting. So upon my conversation with the customer, I realized that one of his quality driver was in terms of content. So he wants to make sure that the face-to-face meeting that we're having is able to give important information to the attendees. So the performance requirement is that content should target all the customers in our supply chain. So we had different types of customer in our supply chain. So I had to make sure that the content that we're going to deliver in that meeting is able to address the different types of customers in our supply chain. And another performance requirement is that the content has to be up to date. So it doesn't it would fail if the content that we're going to present was 3 years ago. The information that we're delivering 3 years ago, so it has to be up to date. So I think what I did was the content has to be updated in the last 6 months. So further discussion with the customer, I realized that one of his quality driver was he wanted an engaging discussion. So it's not just a plenary type where it's one-way communication. So he wanted discussion with the people. So the performance requirement, there has to be a subgroup discussion. So when I designed this 3-day meeting, I made the second day to be more of a discussion type. We had to break the plenary into different groups so that they had a chance to discuss with each other. Because, as you know, the quality driver of my customer was about engagement. Okay, he wants an engaging face-to-face meeting. Another performance requirement because he wanted it to be engaging was to come up with fun activities. I think the measure that I had here was I had to at least plan a 30-minute activity, which involves people standing up and doing active movement. Okay. And of course, another quality driver, but it has to be cost effective. Okay, so there was a cost involved because we're running a meeting, we're going to book hotels, but so it's going to be cost, but at the same time, the revenues that we are going to get from that meeting should be able to support the cost. So one of the performance requirement I had to work with was the registration fee has to be less than $80 per person. So I had to work on that constraint, which means I have to choose carefully in terms of the room size that I have to choose. Okay? And another one is the cost should at least equal to the expenses, or not go beyond. I mean, the earnings that we have from the meeting should at least match the cost of the hotel. Okay, so this was a real life example of how I use the VOC to CTQ tool. So this is a simple tool, and yet it can be very, very helpful in terms of translating your customer needs into something that is measurable. And this is a tool that is normally encountered in the define phase. Next, we go to another tool in the define phase. It's what we call a QCD. Okay, this tool is normally used to categorize your project. And actually, all projects or all challenges that you encounter in the workplace, in this, regardless of the setting, whether it's manufacturing setting or the service-oriented industry, all challenges that you have can actually be classified into a challenge of quality. It could be a challenge of cost, or it can be a challenge on delivery or timeliness. And this is quite important if you're able to categorize the problem that you're feeling, because you would know your plan of attack or the way you would solve that problem. Typically, if the problem can be categorized into a delivery or a timeliness problem, normally this is where you use the lean tools. Okay, the lean approach. The lean approach is very helpful when you want to improve a process that deals with timeliness. If you want to improve cycle time. Okay, so to have a better understanding of the QCD tool, or the quality cost delivery category, let's have a look at some problems that I'm flashing here. So let's try to categorize where each of these problems would belong to. So for example, the first one, let's say we have a customer complaint. It takes six days to process your order. Others or other competitors can do it in 2 days. What type of this problem can be categorized into which one? Quality? Is this a problem of quality? Is this a problem of cost? Or is it a problem of delivery? I'll read the chat box. Yep, precisely. This is a problem on delivery. Thank you. Next one. Out of 100 complaints the department has handled, 50% were not diagnosed correctly on the first call. So I presume this one is you are in a call center, you're receiving complaints, and ideally you should be able to handle your complaints within the first call. So this is a problem on quality. Yes, correct. This is a problem on quality. Third one. 20 customers last week have complained that the online app shut down during their purchase process. What do you think is this type of problem? Is the problem quality, cost, or delivery? Any guess?
Cost.
Actually, this one is more on it's more on quality. Actually, so it's the perception of the customer, the thought process what they did. Okay, so so here we'll look at the quality of your online app. Okay, the number of shutdowns. Number 4, the department takes 5 people to complete a task that normally 2 people can do. Okay, so let's say they're complaining one department to the other. Okay, very good. So this one is a problem on costs. In my previous experience, most of the Six Sigma problems that we tackle is really about cost, because business has to run. They have to be nimble. They have to keep their costs down. So sometimes it can be about projects about reducing their headcount. Okay, it not really when we say reduce headcount, it's not really that the person will be removed. It gets to be reassigned. Okay, that's how you make the business profitable. So normally, if it's an FTE or a full-time employee, rechanneling or rationalization of the department, that is a cost problem. And number 5, last week, 25% of the items produced were defective. What type of problem is this one? This is a problem on quality. Yep, quality. And sometimes it can be linked eventually to cost. But at first glance, this is a quality problem. Okay, so try to remember this tool, the QCD tool. When you're faced with a challenge, ask yourself, what is the category of this problem? Is it the quality, is it cost, or is it delivery? Okay, let's move on. Also, when you're dealing with a project, try to think who are your customers in this project. It helps if you understand who are the customers you are dealing with in this type of challenge or a project. So there are two types of customers. There's the internal customer, or the people working within same organization, or it could be external. Most of the time, we are dealing with external customers, and these are the customers who are paying for our products. At other times, we will be dealing with projects or challenges that will be internal. We're dealing with people working in the organization. Okay, so this slide just tells you what happens if you don't have a customer feedback. Where do you source your project? So there are several ways where you can get feedback of your customers. This is quite helpful if your organization plans to do a Six Sigma project, or plans to do a process improvement, but you don't know where to start and you don't have feedback from the customer. So you can reach out to your customers through a telephone survey. You can have on-the-spot feedback. I think some of you might have encountered where you go to a washroom and there's this screen, how did we serve you today? And then you can easily click on the smiley face. Okay, so that can give a feedback on how the customer feels about the experience. Or you can have complaints form. Okay, you can do a type form survey. Online is a way to go. You can send out an online link, and then your customer can provide feedback. Or another one is a net promoter score. Okay, I'll explain later on what a net promoter score. In fact, this is one of the tools that I also used for my customer. Okay, the net promoter score. Okay, so here it is. This is the slide. What is a net promoter score? A net promoter score is just getting a score by asking 3 questions. Okay, very simple questions. So the first question in the net promoter score is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how would you rate our service? Okay, so you are asking the customer to rate the service from 1 to 10. And then the next one is you ask, why is your score such? So this is a wealth of information because you're asking the customers some top of mind reasons why that customer is rating it as such. Okay, and the third one is, how can we improve it? So by just having these 3 questions, you can have a wealth of information that you can use to improve your process. Okay, so as an example, I've used this tool in my current client. I was asked before, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was in a meeting, and my client said, oh, we need to get feedback from our participants on this meeting. So on the spot, I was asked to come up with a survey. Okay, but because I was familiar with the net promoter score, I used this as a template. So immediately within 10 minutes, I had a survey running, and then we flashed it on the screen, and I just used the net promoter score as my template. So the first question that I had, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how would you rate this meeting? Okay, and then the next question, why is your score such? And then the third one was, how can we improve it? So it provided us a wealth of information. So it's quite interesting. So sometimes a person would score it as an 8, you know, but then for him, that 8 is already a big score. And sometimes the reason for the score could be something that's positive, or it could be something that you can improve on. Okay, so these are mostly like top of mind reasons, and it can provide you an opportunity to do better for your succeeding service. Okay, net promoter score. Okay, another tool that you can use for the define phase, if you'd like to know more about your customers, is the Kano model. It's basically prioritizing features of your product or your service, okay, in terms of how likely it would satisfy your customer. And according to Kano model, the features of your product or your service can be classified primarily into three. It's what you call the exciters, the wants, and the musts. Okay. So the wants are also another term for the wants here would be, they call it the satisfiers, and the musts are the dissatisfiers. So let's look at some of the examples. Imagine a hotel stay, okay, a hotel stay. So a must, by the way, a must is something that when it's there, I mean, a must is something that when it's there, the customer will be okay. Okay, he will not be satisfied with just be an okay reaction. However, when it is not there, the customer will be dissatisfied. Okay, that is a must attribute. For example, hot water and clean linen. If you're running a hotel, so which means that hot water and clean linen, that's already a given. Okay, if it's there, you know, your customer will say, okay, I'm expecting it. Okay. However, if there's no hot water and there's no clean linen, the absence of it will really make their customer dissatisfied. Okay, so that's the must attribute. When it's there, it's okay. When it's not there, your customer will be dissatisfied. Okay, another attribute is what you call a want. So a want is the more there is, the customer will be far more satisfied. So an example will be free super fast broadband, okay, or an internet connection that is really fast. Okay, the faster it is, the customer gets more delighted or more satisfied. Or TV, okay, the bigger the TV, the more satisfied the customer is. Okay, and the last one, the last attribute is what you call the exciters. Okay, when it's something that the customer doesn't expect. Okay, but when it's there, you will really, wow your customer. Okay, so an example will be, let's say you go to a hotel, and then you the customer, the hotel will put a Belgian chocolate, okay, in the evening. That would really excite or delight your customer. And normally in businesses, okay, some just focus on the must and the want, to stay competitive. But if you would like to really create loyal customers, you may want to also look at exciters, okay? Try to look for something that would really go above and beyond and will delight your customer. And sometimes an exciter doesn't have to be expensive. Okay, I'll give an example. I think last November, I came back to, we have this hotel in Bangkok where we usually have this meeting. And I was having breakfast. And I noticed that in my cup, there was a tag. And when I looked at the tag, it was a greeting that mentioned, good morning, Mr. Gayatin, welcome back. So that was a simple gesture, but I was really extremely happy about it because the hotel took note that before pandemic, our organization was staying in that hotel, and they noticed that, and they put that in the greeting and the cup, and that somewhat made me happy. So those small things that don't have to be expensive, but they can really make a big difference. So let's say if you're running a hospitality business and you want to really make an impact to your customers, do not just focus on the must and want. Try to also look for exciters. Okay, so this could be a good Six Sigma project if you would like to look at some exciters in your process. Okay, so that's the Kano model, another tool that you can use for your specific project. Let me pause here for a moment. Okay, yellow belt. Normally, you can you will encounter, especially in the service industry, 3 types of projects. Okay? If you like to work on improving your process, the first type of project is what we call the just do it type of project. Just do it type of projects are, you know what the problem is, you know what the root cause is, and you just implement it. Okay, so these are the type of this is what you call the just do it type of projects. Another type of project is what we call a lean project. Lean project normally are dealing with challenges in terms of timeliness. Okay, so let's say you are delivering a specific product or service, and your customer is complaining that it's taking you too long. That is a problem of timeliness. For this type of project, you can use what we call as the lean approach, or it's a lean project. And there are lean set of tools that you can use for this type of challenges. And I think the most valuable tool here is the value stream map, which we will cover in detail in the measure phase. So that's another type of project that deals with timeliness, and that can be classified as a lean project. Another type of project is, you know that there's a problem, but you don't know what's causing it, and you need to identify what are the drivers, what are the causes. And this type of project are quite perfect for what we call a Six Sigma project. And for this type of projects, it's quite useful to go through the entire DMAIC methodology. Okay? You know there's a problem, but you don't know what's causing it, and you need to investigate. This is the perfect recipe for a Six Sigma project. Okay, so assuming that you are now running a Six Sigma project as a full-blown Six Sigma project, you know that there's a problem in your, let's say, department, but you don't know what the drivers are, and you want to investigate. You come up with a Six Sigma project, and it would help if you have what we call a project charter. Okay, it's like a blueprint. It guides you on how you're going to tackle the project. So a project charter is normally composed of 6 parts. That's what you call the business case. Okay, in the business case, you are trying to explain why you need to focus on this project. Why should this project be done? What will be the consequences if this project is not done? And why should this be prioritized over the others? And how does this fit with the overall business target? In my experience, in dealing with Six Sigma projects, the business has multiple priorities. Okay, so sometimes when you have to present to the boss, you have to really have a clear business case. You have to explain to the boss why this project needs to be prioritized. Okay, and that is covered actually in the business case. If you're running in a small organization where you have the flexibility, then you probably would not need to have a business case if the boss agreed that you have to focus on this project. But in my experience, normally in big organizations, you would have to build a business case, because it's not just you're pitching to your boss, but sometimes the boss will have to pitch to the higher up, to give priority that, hey, this yellow belter would have to focus on this project because it is aligned to the overall organization's target. That covers in the business case. Now, later on in the question and answer portion, if you think that you'd like to give more examples on the business case, I'd probably give more examples in succeeding sessions. Or if you feel that, I think I've looked at the profile of the attendees here. I think most of you, if not all, are working in really small organizations. So it's probably you would not require really further examples in building business cases. But if that's something that you'd like to discuss more, we can discuss in the future sessions. Okay, the next part of the project charter is the problem and opportunity statement. This is basically just objective. You just state what the problem is. It's more about who, what, when, and where, and how big is the problem. And you need to quantify the pain. Okay, quantify the pain of this problem. Later on, I'll give an example of a sample problem statement. The next piece is something that's probably quite familiar to you. It's a goal statement. Okay, because even outside work, we used to make goals for ourselves. So the goal statement is you have to make it a SMART goal, which means specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, and time-bound. And a good practice is you always start with an action or a verb, okay, for a goal statement. So it could be reduce X to Y by this year, or increase, or we call this increase. So normally it's good to start with a verb, okay, for the goal statement. And then project scope. This is quite applicable if you're in a big organization, where if you're handling something that it can lead to scope creep. So when you say scope creep, it goes beyond the focus of your project. It can spread your resources thin. So it would be useful to indicate that in the project scope. And then the fifth one is the project plan. The project plan is just you put some timelines where you want to achieve when, by which phase, by which date. Okay, so it's divided into the 5 phases. When do you expect to finish the define phase? When are you expected to finish the measure phase, analyze, improve, and control? And then the last part is the team composition. In my experience, normally for Lean Six Sigma projects, there is a team composition. There is a champion. The champion are normally the big bosses, the ones that would remove the roadblocks for a specific project. The project lead will be the yellow belt, okay, the one that's running the project. So it could be you, okay, if you have a specific project. And you can have a team member or not, depending on the size of the organization. And you might also have some resource persons. So this is the template for a project charter. If this is something that you'd like to me to give more examples in the future discussions, let me know during the question and answer portion. I'd be happy to give some examples of the project charter. Okay. Here, I'm just giving an example of what a good problem statement is. So the first one is a poor example of problem statement. Reports were late, so customers were angry. So it doesn't give you much information. A good problem statement could be something that's really factual. So for example, for the past 3 months, that's a when. 12 out of 36 reports submitted to the customer were at least 24 hours late. So it's very factual. It tells you something that's measurable, that 12 out of 36 reports submitted to the customer were late by at least 24 hours. Okay, and then you can explain the consequence of this or quantify the pain. Customers rely on these reports to make time-sensitive business decisions. A late report can potentially make a customer lose at least $1,000 business opportunity. So now it provides you a scenario in terms of what's the impact of having these reports late. Okay, and I'm giving this as an example because I had the experience dealing with this type of project. I was handling a team that were submitting reports to Singapore. So we had to specify what's the consequence of submitting a report late. Okay, and now when you look at this problem statement, then you are able to identify that this is something that you may want to consider working on, because having late reports will have an impact to your customer. So what's the importance of the project charter? So there is that line in Alice in Wonderland. Okay, it provides an anchor. So let me just read the statement. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to go, said the cat. I don't know much where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. This slide is just here to let us remind that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If you don't know what your project is, so it can go anywhere. And that's the purpose of the project charter. It provides an anchor. It provides a direction to where your project is headed. Okay. So always remember, if you're working in a big organization and you're running a Six Sigma project, to always have a project charter. Okay. Another tool that you can use in the project charter is a simple tool called the in-scope, out-scope. Okay. It's identifying what's in and what is out. Okay. What's within the scope and what's not within the scope. An example of an in-scope, out-scope might be in geographical areas. So it could be that with that scope of your project would only be, I mean, let's say within the country of the Philippines. If you don't specify that, what can go wrong is that if you don't specify your scope in the project, further along the project execution, your boss might say, how come you did not include Singapore? How come you did not include Vietnam? Okay, and you will have scope creep. Suddenly you get all these additional requirements, and it will spread your resources thin. It can lead to a delay in your project. So it's quite important to set the scope of your project. It might not be applicable now in your existing process, but maybe in the future, if you're working with a big organization and you have multiple priorities, it's really important to specify your scope. And it also drives accountability as well, because what you don't want is once the project is finished, your boss will ask you something that you did not commit in the first place. So that's a way of you being being advanced thinker to put it already in the scope, so that you know what you are expected to do and what is expected from you as a deliverable. Okay. Next one is mapping the process. So this is a tool that's quite useful, process mapping. So here's an example of, I think these are the 6 blind men, and each one has a different perspective of the elephant. Okay, so people might have a different perspective of a process if they're only looking at from their own perspective, and that's why it would be good if you have a process map that everyone can agree upon. Okay? Just like picturing an elephant, you can look at a process map that visualizes the process. Okay, I'll give an example on why process map is quite important, especially in the service industry. Okay, I have an experience working in a manufacturing environment. And in the manufacturing environment, it is really quite easy to see the transformation. Okay? For example, I used to work in a chewing gum company, and I would go to a plant, manufacturing plant, and I can visualize, I can really see when I go to the plant how the chewing gum is transformed. I can see the gum base being extruded. I can see sugar added into it and add flavors. I can see the gum base being flattened, being cut into pieces and wrapped, and finally becoming, the chewing gum that we are eating. So it's very visual, the manufacturing setup. Go to a plant, you see the transformation. I also have the experience working in a business process outsourcing side of a bank, where our workers were transforming data from the ledgers into financial reports. But when you go to the shop floor, what you see are just people sitting in front of their computers. Okay, so that's the picture on the right side. This is a typical setup when you go to a financial business process outsourcing industry. You just see people sitting at their desk. You don't see the transformation. You don't see the transformation of the data being converted into financial reports. Okay? You don't see that at all. And that's why it's quite useful when you have a process map. So the process map details how the transformation is happening in the process. So process map is really, really useful for the service industry where you don't really get to see the transformation that is happening. And these are the different types of mapping exercise. There's what we call a tool called SIPOC. There is a flow chart. There is a cross-functional chart. And then there is the value stream map. Okay, I'll probably just cover 2 here because I think we have 15 minutes left. I'll just continue the other parts of the module in the next session. Okay, so a process map, just like the zoom option in Google Maps. Okay, there's a different levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 will be what we consider as the highest level when you zoom out. Okay? It's from a high-level perspective. So here, an example here is an onboarding process. You say you have a new candidate joining an organization. So it could be that the 4 blocks would be job posting, candidate selection, job offer, and onboarding. These are quite high level. And more detailed than level 1 is probably level 2, where you have the sub processes. Okay, so here an example here would be a more detailed explanation on what happens during the onboarding. Could be the submission of the requirements. There could be the assignment of the work buddy to help this new employee, sorry. And then there could be the activation of his ID or the badge, activation of the email, assignment of the workstation, and orientation. So it's probably a level 2, more detailed. And the one that has the most detail will probably be level 3. Here you can have additional information such as decision steps. There's waiting, there's storage, inspection, and other loops. I think further down there's a example of probably a level 3. So if your process map has already a decision step, then that's more likely a level 3 kind of process map. And typically for a yellow belt project, okay, you will be asked to, your company will ask you to come up with a level 3 process map. So we've said that there are 4 types of process map: SIPOC, flowchart, cross-functional chart, and value stream map. We'll cover the first one, which is the easiest one, is SIPOC. It stands for supplier, input, process, output, and customer. Okay. Here's an example of a SIPOC for let's say a coffee shop. Okay. So the supplier is the coffee company. Their inputs will be coffee and beans and water, and the process will be grinding the coffee, putting in the coffee filter, placing the filter in brewer, and then brewing the coffee. That's the process. And the output will be the hot coffee, and the customer will be you, okay, the one who takes in the output. Okay, so SIPOC is very, very simple. Okay, you just identify the process is, what's the output, what's the input, who supplies that input, and who receives that output. Although this is a very simple tool, it's quite useful because it helps you align who your customer is. Okay? It helps you align your process to your end customer. And once you are able to align your process to your customer, you would be able to know how you would satisfy your customer. Okay. So very simple tool, SIPOC. I really encourage you, if you encounter in your project, to use SIPOC because it helps you align to your customer. Okay, and the last example that I will give you for this module is the flowchart example. Okay, this is a level 3 process map. It's more detailed because there is that decision box. I'm giving an example here I think this one is an example on vaccination. Okay, so there's a start. The person shows ID and documents to the first station. Then the frontliner will indicate the classification level and gives you a form. And then you will fill out the form of your information. Okay, and then the next part is there's a frontliner will take your blood pressure. And then if your blood pressure is normal, he will ask you to proceed to the doctor, who will review your medical history and determine your fitness. And once you're fit for vaccination, there's a decision diamond there. If you're fit for vaccination, then you proceed. You receive your vaccination. If it's not, then the person will have to reschedule your vaccination. And there's an end line. So this is an example of a flow chart. This is a level 3 process map. If you haven't done this in your life, I suggest that you do. It helps you practice, especially once you do your yellow belt project, if you need to pursue. So the flowchart has just a simple components. Okay, these are the most important ones. You have the start and the end, the operation. Okay, so the operation, normally you put the name of the person doing the activity or the activity itself, and then you have the arrow, which indicates the the direction. Then it's the connector, and then the decision. The diamond is used for a decision. I think with these 5 symbols, you can already do a flow chart. Okay, flow chart exercise. I think the next one is cross-functional flow chart, but I think that's it for now because almost 1 hour. We will continue the next part of the define phase in the next session. So I'm gonna stop sharing this now. I'm gonna stop the